Good morning, everyone. Dr. Ngobo, we live in such a complex world. Some of these VET review consultants are in the next room with their exhibition stands, and we are busy discussing them in here. It's quite an interesting dilemma to balance, really. My name is James Matsie. Thank you, Asma, for those very warm introductions. I won't be long, colleagues, councillors. But before I start, I wanted to find out, by show of hands, how many people are coming to the CIGFARO conference for the first time? Okay, I see a couple here and there, here and there. And I guess that most of you would be here today because it's your first time, so you'd like to have the full experience. So it's good to see that we have a lot of new faces in the room. My presentation basically seeks to discuss infrastructure, finance, excellence, a very, very difficult topic, ultimately because of the fact that every time we talk about infrastructure finance, almost 85 to 90% of the municipalities in the room automatically block their ears because of the assumption that the conversation does not apply to them. I particularly like this quadrant a lot because it articulates very clearly who qualifies to explore different sources of finance. When you look at the quadrant bottom left, my left, it talks about grants only. It talks about how municipalities that are in poor economic regions with very low revenue potential can access grants only. And then the block just next to it, municipalities that have very, very viable spaces in terms of the economy are able to access loans and grants. And then, of course, when you move to the upper quadrants blocks, municipalities that have high revenue capabilities, but not necessarily very viable spaces, would then go for loans and grants. And of course, the loans on bond spaces would be more applicable to your more ICMs and metros. But ultimately, the reality is that in this country, with the current fiscal framework that we have, and the fact that over time, infrastructure grants will decline, municipalities need to be more mindful in terms of how they can access infrastructure finance. That becomes quite important from where we stand. And the conversation that we had, Dr. Ngobo, on Monday at the master class was to pose a question in terms of what could be the role of CIGFARO in as far as your ability to support municipalities around infrastructure finance. So we see what this conference can do, the kind of audience that it can attract. You have CFOs coming here, you have MMCs for finance coming here. And our argument was then that we need to look at exploring a no-deal platform where we could bring municipalities together with financiers to have a conversation on infrastructure finance. Talk about municipal investments. What are your plans? What do you want to explore? What are your options and how can we help you? We believe that that platform, though it might be ideal that it becomes part of the CIGFARO conference, but we might need to have a different platform and conversation where we talk to financiers, we talk to commercial banks, DFIs, and then we invite municipalities to come and converse in terms of what we want to achieve. And of course, in terms of the conversations that we have, we always want to appreciate the fact that in this country, we have a very decentralized sector. The most decentralized sector in the continent, on the continent. I had a couple of conversations with some of my colleagues from the kingdom just yesterday, and some of their points around the role of national government as far as municipal fiscal framework is concerned, the fact that municipalities can borrow. But ultimately, the fact of the matter is that in this country, municipalities can borrow. And I also want to argue that if there were no borrowing capabilities for South African municipalities, municipalities would be complaining about the fact that there is one of the reasons why they have challenges is because they can't borrow. But of course, there is that option, and most municipalities don't explore it. We tend to find ourselves in a situation where infrastructure is degrading ultimately. Infrastructure grants can only do so much. Of course, there are other variables like how do you prepare your projects, going to markets, and ultimately, how do you make sure that you manage your infrastructure moving forward. With that said, and the reason why I asked the colleagues in the room, how many have attended these kinds of conversations? It's my view that in this particular conference, we have been gathering forever, colleagues. It's been every year we sit and we converse. A colleague of mine said that his first CIGFARO conference was in 2003. That's literally 21 years ago. Quite very interesting. And we have said it all. I think we have definitely said it all. We are very, very, very capable in terms of unpacking our challenges, whether it be revenue sufficiency, whether it be governance issues. And in preparing for this conversation, I was a bit worried about how enlightening I will be in this conversation. I don't want to be a generalist. I don't want to say something that is completely that has already been said in the past. So with that, I thought we could just have a conversation on an area which I believe municipalities are not investing a lot of time on, which is the energy transition conversation. The energy transition in paradigm with the just energy transition, a program that is run at national government level, based on the concessions and the agreements that government had done in the Paris agreements in 2015 in terms of the goal to move towards a more cleaner approach of generating electricity in our country. And ultimately to talk about the municipal just energy transition mechanisms and financing mechanisms and what is happening at the space. In terms of the background, the JET implementation plan is a roadmap that enables South Africa to take targeted strides towards meeting its decarbonization commitments. This will be done in a manner that delivers the just outcomes for those affected by energy transition, and I think this becomes quite key. Every time we talk about the energy transitions now in this country, the Komati area becomes a case study. Mpumalanga is the only area where we have these conversations. But the fact of the matter is that across the globe, we are going through a revolution in the whole industry as far as the energy markets are concerned. And because of the position that the municipalities have within the constitution in terms of electricity regulation, this will affect each and every municipality in the room over time. It also ultimately confirms South Africa's resolve to manage the JET at a pace, scale, and cost that is consistent with the country's socio-economic development path, needs, and affordability. So Chapter 10 of the JET implementation plan focuses on municipalities. It then provides an outline of what the challenges are, what the programs are, and how much it will cost to ultimately finance those programs. And one of the recommendations from this particular chapter is that there should be a JET municipal council. It's comprised of the majority of local government representatives. SALGA is involved there, and also the Association of Municipal Electricity Utilities, and also metro municipalities as well. This is basically how the structure looks like. There's a council there at the top. It also has a secretariat. It's also supported by the JET PMU. There's 3 work streams involved there. There's capacity development. I will be focusing on the financing structure today, and then also the energy access as well. We had a conference in August where we had a conversation around the JET implications for municipalities. The president of the country and also the minister of electricity also provided a context there. The purpose was to assess the current electricity distribution landscape in South Africa as far as the municipalities are concerned. It was also to assess the status quo in respect of the municipal institutional and financial capabilities as far as the electricity distribution is concerned, to also deliberate on and confirm the institutional arrangements in terms of references for the proposed council, the secretariat, the work streams, and all the other institutions that will support this particular program. So this is basically the needs that are stipulated in the JET IP. All in all, it adds up to 1.4 trillion, I believe. And of that 1.4 trillion, municipalities need 319 billion to be able to transition as far as the energy transitions are concerned. Specifically zooming into what those needs are for municipalities. So 99% of those needs are more infrastructure-based in terms of the distribution maintenance, and also the modernization of the infrastructure as well, and also dealing with backlogs, also the operational aspects being demand-side management, access design, capacity building, planning, and also how we reconfigure the revenue model to be able to respond to these transitions. This is the latest JET IP financing status from the pledges that were received by the country. There was 11 billion that was committed by all these countries, and if you can recall, it's 11 billion against 1 point something trillion, which means that ultimately there's a huge funding gap as far as this transition is concerned. And as far as the financing mechanisms and how the work stream will work, the work stream will develop a programmatic approach to financing solutions for the scale and the scope of the need for the refurbishment, upgrade, and development of distribution grids and renewable energy generation assets by municipalities. It will be broadly responsible for the origination or consolidation and prioritization of the grid and energy infrastructure priority pipelines, and also identification and matching of financing. In terms of project identification, it's about, of course, originating and consolidating assessments on the state of municipal distribution grids. So the goal is to first focus on the top 20 municipalities, but SARGA has argued that because this particular transition will affect all municipalities, it should have a blanket approach to identify and quantify high-impact bulk and distribution grid infrastructure projects requiring financing solutions, to identify the scale and scope of new renewable energy generation projects that need to be accommodated in the electricity distribution infrastructure solutions, to support municipal project developments in the grid and generation activities through business case development, fundraising, and feasibility studies, and unlocking barriers in the enabling environment. In terms of the financing solutions, of course, it's about managing engagements between different parties and stakeholders. It's also about engaging National Treasury in terms of the revisions to some of the discretionary grants. So the goal is to look at the Division of Revenue Act and see how we can repurpose some of these grants to respond to these transitions as well, to identify legal, regulatory, and policy blockages that require attention to facilitate financing of this particular infrastructure, and to also quantify individual municipal infrastructure financing requirements. So moving forward, of course, these are all aspects that have happened in the past. Apologies, I forgot to, I missed some of the edits there of the slides. Yes, SARGA has been appointed as the coordinator of this particular financing stream. We will assume the secretariat role as well. The work stream inception meetings have started already, and ultimately the financing work stream will lead, as expected, to play a critical role in financing the mechanisms of the JET municipal portfolio. In terms of the needs and situational analysis, and this will be my last slide, short term, the first 2 years to look at the development of strategies and plans, to do studies and design stages, project preparation of large projects, skills development and capacity building, infrastructure maintenance and upgrades. And then medium term, 3 to 5 years, we'll start looking at, again, upgrading infrastructure and focusing on project preparation. And then long term, beyond JET IP, how we implement some of these projects and some of the partnerships and long-term concessions we'll be looking at as well. And that will be my last slide. Thank you so much. Oh, no, it's not actually. Apologies. Potential financing mechanisms. We are looking at international multilateral financing mechanisms, all those financing facilities there, the green climate finance, et cetera, fund, et cetera. And then, of course, this will be international. At a domestic level, we'll also look at all those funds, also looking at DFIs as well, looking at how we can repurpose our grants, and also looking at how we can pool all resources for municipalities. And I think that was the last slide. Thank you.
Thank you, James. I noticed in one of your slides you spoke about one of the options was a blended finance mechanism. Maybe you can just expand on that a little for us while we get some questions from the floor and everybody gathers their thoughts. Do we have any hands in the meantime so we can get the mic there? Okay, I have a hand right in the front here, so if we can get a mic in the meantime to the front, please. Thank you so much. Do you want to take the first question, so long? Can we take the first question, so long? Or? Okay, let's take 2 questions and then James will respond. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Thank you very much, James. That's very enlightening. It's something new. And it's coming from a high level by the looks of it. I was just wondering, a lot of this, obviously, if you start rolling out the whole program, and we're now in the planning stage, obviously, individual municipalities will have to also be included in the whole program and in their planning. You know, going right to the spatial development, the IDPs, all of that, and in the financial planning around that, to incorporate that. I think at the moment it is still on a very high level, and it's obviously looking at, you know, where the majority of the population are living, the metros, etc. But it seems like we don't really have full representation from the smaller municipalities. Would there be perhaps a scope for CIGFARO to become involved in a way to represent the smaller municipalities in the whole process, you know, of the JET program then going forward?
Thank you so much. Is there another hand somewhere before James responds? Okay, I don't see any other hands, so maybe we can conclude with those 2, James. Thank you. Is it not switch on?
Thank you so much for those comments. And maybe just to start with Mr. Nolte's comments, indeed, it's still very high level, and this is the conception and planning phase of it. For me, particularly, what becomes worrying is to what extent are municipalities crowded in these conversations. Because if you sit in all these discussions, I mean, we talk about municipalities without municipalities, and ultimately, a lot of the impacts downstream will affect municipalities. I like to juxtapose this particular reform with the fact that we argue that the white paper on local government ultimately provides most of the revenue potential through electricity. And when you look at what has happened in this country over the past 10 years, as far as Eskom's erosion of that revenue potential for municipalities through their own tariffs, and also the fact that there's a whole market reform now happening where there are new players coming into the market. Eskom has been unbundled. There will be other distributors of electricity. So what does that mean for that white paper argument for municipalities? It essentially means that when you look at electricity generation, when you look at electricity revenue in the next 10 to 15 years, the potential for that revenue will not be the same as today. So indeed, these kind of conversations need to come to particularly CFOs in order to understand that at an environmental level, what are the threats to the sustainability of the municipality as far as revenue is concerned,
And ultimately, how can we best start planning to respond to that? The City of Cape Town has a energy strategy. They're very, very interesting in terms of how they approach it. I saw just yesterday, the mayor was opening a site where they are going to construct their own solar generating plant. Those are the kind of ideas and thoughts that municipalities need to start having now, because ultimately with the opening of the market, those are the kind of potential revenue streams that they could explore, the kind of investments that they need to make. And we need to have CFOs looking at these options, having these conversations, and I agree with him that ultimately this can be a proposal that we make, that how do we crowd in a party like CIGFARO to be part of these conversations. The question that you posed, Program Director, in terms of blended finance, there's a DORA clause that I keep forgetting. Around 2018, what National Treasury did is it introduced an option to municipalities to pledge their grants in order to go out to markets and borrow. So that would be, for me, a form of blended finance, where you take your own public infrastructure financing funds and then you blend it with the private sector funds. Some of the challenges that we've had with that particular pledging is that ultimately the DORA only guarantees funds for 3 years. And most of these projects, most of these construction projects that we explore would be 10 to 15 year, 20 year life cycle infrastructure projects. So how do we balance that in terms of pledging? So National Treasury is definitely working on that. So that would be a definition of a blended finance. Thank you.